Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Anka, and with this message, I intend to bring you some hope to elevate your spirits, your mood, your perception. Yet, I'm still coming from this frequency of, or the theme of suffering, and I feel like it's always suffering or love. Of course, they're the same thing anyway. So whatever. But today and these past week or so, the suffering has been way more intense. Yeah, there's these themes of um, sorrow, grief, intense loss. And actually, I'm not so much talking about the fires in LA. What I'm talking about is what happened before that in a higher realm. The fires are kind of the unfolding, they are the manifestation of what already has happened. So now we're getting to see the good news, and so I'm here to speak it. I also needed it. I'm coming from an empowered knowing a state, but my body is not quite there. You know what I mean? So it's like I have to speak it so it gets to you, so then it gets back to me as well. So the good news here is that this suffering, I'm calling it the masculine suffering, has reached completion. It has reached a finish. It finished itself. So this is different than before, when I have arrived at these conclusions of, oh, the masculine has ended its process. It's now coming into union with the feminine. I feel like those were even smaller cycles of completion, of endings within this bigger cycle of completion. And by the way, when I say masculine and feminine, I really mean the forces of creation. I really mean the dualistic positive and negative, the engine through which this realm is possible, right? So, but this morning, as I'm reflecting on this, and I'm really feeling the suffering very much as masculine, I'm realizing, holy cow, this feels like we are at the mercy of gigantic cycles of this twin flame dance between the masculine and the feminine. And this completion feels like, the story of the twin flame, when the masculine and the feminine, they come into a fierce, passionate union, but because it is too fast, they, or especially the masculine, freaks out or whatever happens, and he just runs off. Yeah, and the feminine might chase him or not, or whatever. Well, this whole process that I've been in for the past 3.5 years or so, whatever time, that I've been aware and very much engaged in the transmutation of this. It's just recent that I'm like, oh, I'm hands off. I'm done with this. Yet somehow my body, because the masculine and the feminine is still within the body, so it's still not immune. But it feels like the masculine took off, and it was processing this love the way the masculine knows how. Typically, in the cave at the infinite abyss, and it's processing it in solitude and with such responsibility. And I see this in actual males. And so as all this astral stuff was happening, I also have the coincidence to work with couples where I get to see how both the feminine and the masculine gets to process the same conflict. And this was huge for me. And even though there was nothing really new. I knew that, but this time I got to see it in parallel. And this is not a comparison from the aspect, which one is better, which one is worse, which one. But it's really interesting to me to note the differences of how the feminine processes the suffering, right? The sorrow, the loss, right? Like grief, that type of thing. And for the feminine, the processing is very dynamic, right? There's always a flow. Yes, there might be confusion, and there might be, a lot of emotion going up all at once. But it's some type of a whirlwind type of dynamic process, which doesn't allow the weight of the density of that suffering to stagnate in one specific spot, which kind of gives the feminine the upper hand, if I'm going to say it like that, or the potential to process or to get out of the suffering easier or quicker. The masculine, on the other hand, he's in a way like more serious, and it's not out of selfishness. It's actually the opposite. It's out of selflessness, and it's because he actually got to touch love and got to experience it at a very deep level, that he took on way more responsibility, and he took on burden and the weight, so that the feminine doesn't have to. But he created this martyrdom, like he created this cave. Really, I'm going to call it the masculine cave. And the suffering, like this environment, reminds me, or I shouldn't say remind me because I've never experienced it, but it makes me think of what, let's just say, 50-degree Kelvin feels like. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost absolute frozen, still environment. There's still slightly a little bit of a wiggle room in there, but for the most part, everything is frozen shut. There's no movement. It's just this intense suffering and burden and yuck, and there's no coming out of it on its own. And humanity feels like got, or the collective, at least the collective that I served with, man, this suffering was a lot. And we processed a lot through our bodies. And finally, I feel like we have arrived, or this type of suffering has arrived at a mental understanding. And all suffering is mental, so maybe it's not enough, right? Because pain is pain, and the capacity for us to understand and for us to perceive what is happening within the environment, that is the suffering, right? So now the masculine has reached such an intensity that finally it broke through in its understanding, in its mental logic, in its mental analysis, the capacity to process this information. And not only that, but the energetic release that this understanding broke through. It's like it broke through the ice, and it switched scales, right? Because I feel like, the masculine was on a Kelvin temperature scale and the feminine was on a Celsius scale. So finally it's like, do I have to arrive at 0 degree Kelvin? No, I can just take it to 0 degrees Celsius, right? It's still zero, but totally different scales. But that's kind of how it feels like. Finally, they're at least talking the same understanding. They're talking the same perception, and the feminine sees and understands the unnecessary suffering, which is very painful as well. Just observing that, but because this ice melted somehow, there is a release. And this is what we're feeling at this collective level. This suffering is finally these huge masculine cycles breaking through. And I can also feel that the energy hasn't stabilized. They don't necessarily know what they're going to do or how the new process is going to look like. And yet, there is a determination to do things different, to do them on whatever. If it's not the Celsius scale, it's the whatever, a different scale. But there is a newness that, again, it's not just a new beginning. It's like quantum. It's like maybe it's timelines, right? We switch timelines. It's like I can't even compare it from before because the scale is not the same, right? So that is the amazing news. How this whole story came about. We enter January, and of course, I do cards. First card for the collective for the year. And I didn't share this yet. I got the Tower. Does this look familiar? From this card, I had several meditations that showed me exactly the same thing, slightly in different ways. But what I saw was literally structures, and I'm talking geometric structures in the 4D, right? Because every mental construct is within a geometric structure, which creates a resonance. From that resonance, the 3D material can be created, right? So everything that I'm talking about is in this 4D realm. And so these structures that to me were definitely a collective construct. So they talk to me about institutions, corporations, industries, systems, that type of structures, huge, right? But they're mental collective systems, let's just call them. They were self-destructing, and the self was underlined. It was very clear. This is coming sort of from the innocence that there is not one specific reason, one specific motive, one specific action that led to the destruction of these structures. They were no longer being supported by the foundation that they were built upon. Now, the foundation was very clear, and oh my God, now I'm remembering all the earthquakes. There was a series of earthquakes in Mexico, California, I think before the fires, right before the fires, or right at that time. And now I'm relating it to this foundation because the foundation is the individual's work showing up as the collective. But this is our belief systems, I'm going to call it morality, our ideas, our desire to experience life. And that which now we desire, or maybe even the redefinition of violence, that I remember that was a theme. All right, things like that, these ideas of what is normal have elevated to such a degree as a foundation that they are no longer in line with what the collective is interested in experiencing. And therefore, these structures are self-destructing. So yes, in the 3D, there might be a concrete um, event that creates the physical destruction. But the message was very clear for me that this is very much a collective doing um, of those participating in changing the fundamental principles of this desire to experience life, basically, which I thought it was way more elegant. It's a very neutral perspective, something that I can embrace and I can expand within with excitement and build on that with excitement and with my own passion again. So the suffering and the sorrow for me started with these series of meditations, starting with from the tower. And then the fires happened in LA. And I remember coming out of this particular meditation, and the tower was still like, in the top of my eye right there, right? My inner eye. And I was asking myself, I wonder how this is going to unfold. Just to have the answer. I just didn't expect to be such a literal unfolding at this time. I thought it would take months, maybe years for that unfolding to happen. And I'm aware that this is a small part. This is just the beginning with the fires. And it was kind of a reminder to, despite what it is that I'm feeling, and my body is very engaged in this release of the sorrow, despite that, I have to remain right in this higher understanding, in this realm of elegance and of neutrality. And so it's not been easy, that's for sure. But somehow, even if we are not outwardly celebrating, I feel, just because I had to speak this message out loud, we have to celebrate this frequency of completion. We have to recognize it, right? We have to give it the indeed it is so, because otherwise I'm packing my bags and heading to Jupiter. It's, it's been tough. It's been so heavy for years. And that's why this exhaustion, I think a lot of us actually fell sick with the flu and all kinds of other sicknesses and fever. But this exhaustion is not from now. This is years of working through this intense suffering, which now finally has consumed itself into this completion. And again, it's more than that. It's somehow reorganizing itself into motivation and an action. Like, I can already feel it through my exhaustion. And I can't sleep, so I wake up at 3:00 in the morning, and so I'm a zombie, and yet the clarity and the passion and the desire and the movement forward and the new and the love, they're all there already. So the way to bring the gratitude in and to bring this frequency and move this along is through the celebration as an acknowledgement, as a recognition. So I hope this has been good news for you. If you've been there, I'm definitely sharing and not that it matters. I feel like we have arrived into a self-knowing that we don't have to reach out and say, hey, are you feeling this? Is this true? No, it is true. We're done with that and we know it. We know what it's happening. And it's almost like we don't even care to fully understand anymore exactly, or what's the precision, because it's like I know, even if I don't, if I can't articulate with precision what it is that it's happening, and I don't think we can. um, these are much bigger events than I think we can allow ourselves to see that is possible, right? So anyway, if you desire to connect with other people, I have Circle Back to Self, which is a discussion and meditation circle, which is Wednesday after, or in the morning, Mountain Time, Denver time. If you would like a one-on-one session, all that stuff is on my website. But either way, I am with you doing this work, and I'll see you in the ether. Thank you.